Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. We're going to do another mimer that the Rebbe said exactly 40 years ago on Purim. Tov Shemem Hey. And of course, this gives us strength, power, inspiration to do. And there's a lot of fundamental things that are discussed in this mimer, as in every mimer. But the very basis of how we serve God based on the Torah is discussed here. And the Purim story is really an illustration of the Jewish perseverance throughout the ages and their commitment to God. Keemu, Vekiblu, Hayehudim. In chapter 9, in the Megillah, at the end, it says that the Jews kept and they received, and there it says that which they had done, they accepted upon themselves and their children. And then it goes on to say to celebrate Purim. The Talmud speaks about this. So Pirush B'Gemara Masechta Shabbos. So the Talmud in Tractate Shabbos explains, page 88a. Keemu ma shekiblu kvar. They upheld, they kept, they ratified that which they had already received. Because it says Keemu Vekiblu. They kept it and they received it. What do you mean? What did they receive? So the simplest way means that they kept that which Esther decreed upon them to fulfill the commemoration of Purim. But this wording, the sages teach us, tell us that they ratified that which they had already received. B'shas matan Torah, at the time of the giving of the Torah, that's when it all began. They began to do this. And afterwards, there was the ratification of the Torah in the days of Purim. If you do it, you could have a sin in the sea, and it was a Torah, Elad Mura Zokin. And we know the specific teachings of the Rebbeim regarding this in the Torah of the Alter Rebbe and the Shari Oira of the Mittler Rebbe, the second Rebbe, and in the Oira Torah of the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe, and in the Chassidic discourses of the subsequent Rebbeim, our leaders. We have to understand what is so special about the days of Purim, to the extent that they ratify and strengthen and give a new not only meaning but a new strength in something which was already affected and accomplished by the giving of the Torah. Gam tzarich lahav maya shaychas de Keemu Vekiblu Hayehudim lenes Purim hakosher mgzeres hamon. Also, we have to understand what is the connection with the fact that the Jewish people kept, they ratified what they received in terms of the Torah. What is that connected with the miracle of Purim that has to do with the decree of Haman to abolish, heaven forbid, and to annihilate the Jewish people, heaven forbid? The key one shehoin the Keemu Vekiblu Yehudim kipshutei, ein in yetz midipshutei hayakosher mnes Purim, because this whole idea of the ratification of the Torah was connected with as a result of the Purim story. That means that the whole Purim story is connected with this idea, so it's connected with the miracle of Purim too. And therefore, from this we understand that everything in terms of the Purim story are connected to the giving of the Torah. Not just a plain connection. But through the events of the Purim story, that brought about the ratification of what began and what they began to do at the giving of the Torah. That means that through the whole Purim story, which begins with the beginning of the Megillah, which says, and it was in the days of Achashverosh, and all the details that the Megillah says, and then certainly the whole general story of what happened, and I guess also the commentaries, etc. Specifically, through this, what happened in the Purim story, they kept and they ratified that which they received earlier, the Torah. But it was a Torah. So the Rebbeim explain that we have to understand what happened at Matan Torah. What happened by the giving of the Torah, and that within whatever happened at the giving of the Torah, that was ratified and strengthened at the Purim story. It's not understood. Why did the Torah have to be given? It says the Torah preceded the world. The Medrash tells us that the Torah preceded the world by 2,000 years. We've already had this previous one with him. It's explained that means in stature, in importance, but it's something that the world came for the need of the Torah. The Torah was first. And our sages teach us in the Talmud. Avraham Zokim V'Yesh B'Shiva, Yitzchak Zokim V'Yesh B'Shiva. Abraham, the elder, he sat and dwelled. He learned in a yeshiva, Torah study. Yitzchak, the elder, and he dwelled and learned, studied Torah in yeshiva. Yaakov Zokim V'Yesh B'Shiva. Jacob also studied yeshiva. And from the days of our forefathers, the Torah was we never ceased to have Torah study. There was always a continuous and a Torah study. There was a continuum of Torah learning from the days of Abraham. When they went to Egypt, they had a yeshiva too. It says the tribe of Levi learned. We learned in a different mimer also that even there was Moshe and Moshe's father, etc. And especially since the Torah says explicitly that God made the deal with Abraham, and says because he will pass on to his children, he will keep. It says there, my mitzvahs, my statutes, and my Torah. And not only does it say my Torah, it doesn't say Torah si, but it says v'soiroi soi, which is the plural. Shtei Torahs, two types of Torah. Where the Talmud tells us, achas, why does it say Torah soi? My Torahs in the plural. Achas teresh v'ksav, achas teresh v'alpeh. One is a reference to the written Torah, one is a reference to the oral Torah. That means that Abraham, our father, kept the whole Torah, all of it. And then the Talmud goes on and adds and stresses. Before it was given, Abraham kept it. Right? It says elsewhere, the Rebbe doesn't mention it here, that he kept every detail. He even made an Eruv Tafshilin when Shabbos, when Yom Tov was going into Shabbos. V'im kein ma po'al ha'ini de Matan Torah. If that's the case, what was the big idea? What was the big deal about the Torah being given at Sinai? Abraham already kept the Torah. He was keyed in on it, and he already passed it on to his children. V'ad shehoya kol ra'ash turim, the keles, v'lapidim, v'aroshim chulu, to the extent that it was such a great show, great with all the noise and pomp and purpose and circumstance, the big storm, the shturim, the great happening there. There was sounds, thunder, lightning, and the Mount Sinai was smoking, etc. And the Rabbeim explain at length in their discourses, even though the forefathers, they are the chariot. A chariot is something very special. Beginning from Abraham. We'll talk about in a moment what a chariot means. Whether we're referring to the level of how he served God with his soul. He was called the lover of God, and the one who God loves. To the extent that all of his limbs were totally devoted, subjugated on godliness. He didn't do anything that wasn't godly. That's why it's called a chariot. A chariot only moves where it's being driven, where it's being dragged. If it's being pulled by the animal, it has no mind of its own, so to speak. Keemu, as it explained in Tanya, like the Tanya explains that this chariot means, in a way, that all of the days, forever, for all time, they didn't stop even for a moment. All of their limbs, their whole body was only a chariot for the godly, so for the supernal will, for what God wanted. They did nothing different. They trained themselves to literally be like a chariot. Only do what is right, and what is holy, and what is important. Exclusively for the supernal will. Nevertheless, our sages tell us, look, if Abraham is so great, the forefathers were so great, they developed themselves to be totally all godly people, so godly, all-encompassing. The sages nevertheless say, the mitzvahs that the forefathers did, they were like just an odor, the sense of smell. Aval anu shemen turak shemecha. But we are, the way we do the command, when we serve God, that's already like the oil, which is already emptied and can be tangible. This is, of course, a reference to the Song of Songs, Shir Hashirim, the third verse of the first chapter, where it says that the oil is fragrant and it smells good, right? But that's only when it's not being used. You could smell it, but it's not yet. It can't be, and the Rebbe will explain it too. It's not yet able to permeate something and be effective in that sense. But then afterwards, it says, but when the oil is poured out, empty from the bottle, can be used, it becomes the physical thing. So let's see what the Rebbe says here. V'hainu shlefi shavedes Avraham v'aderas avedes avos tzadikim v'chol bnei Yisrael kerimat teira hoisa avodah shepoel b'nishmosan. That means that the service that Abraham did, and similarly the serving of the way the other forefathers, Isaac and Jacob, and all of the righteous, and all of the children of Israel before the Torah was given, this was service that affected their soul, and in the supernal realms, the supernal worlds, but it didn't affect the physical world. But truth be told, when Abraham was here on earth and he was working, he did mitzvahs. He was the bastion of kindness. He was the example of kindness, and he actually did the mitzvahs the benevolent mitzvahs, the charitable mitzvahs, and he brought in the guests, etc., etc. He fed the people in a way that it affected the world. So the world was affected by the mitzvahs that he did. And like we see, just in the physical sense, how Abraham took in guests. Like we have the story when the angels came. So the Rebbe brings this verse. He shares the mitzvah with Sarah, and he tells her to knead the dough and make the cakes. The matzah cakes was Pesach. And then he himself, Abraham ran to the cattle, right, to serve the meal, to get the meat, etc. But nevertheless, after they performed the mitzvah, it didn't make a change. It didn't transform the world. the physicality of the world, the material of the world. The world itself still remained mundane. To make a godly object. So, for instance, and we've discussed this in the past, there are certain things that become holy innately, and they have to be treated with an express special purpose. For instance, let's take the holiest object. Let's take a Sefer Torah. Torah has to be in the ark, and has to be cherished and revered, etc., proper reverence, etc., etc. Can't be in a despicable sense, etc. Tefillin is a holy object. Holy books have to be buried if they aren't usable anymore. Certain things have to be put, you can't just dispose of it because it already got holy. Even a Torah cover, the Rambam goes into what could be made into what. It could only become something holy or not less holy, etc. So the world didn't get anything holy. When here the Rebbe doesn't bring it here, but we've learned in the past, the Rebbe has mentioned it, the idea of the sticks, that it says that Jacob was affecting tefillin with the sticks that he peeled off some of the bark so that it looked like an arm with tefillin wrapped around it, and he did that when he was breeding the sheep, as is famously and well known. But those sticks weren't holy like tefillin. They could just be thrown in the garbage. They could be just discarded freely, because he couldn't bring holiness into the world. Here it's a Purim Fabrengen, remember? And Purim was really in a special spirit. And here the Rebbe, no holds barred, explained something that Abraham did, because he needed something holy when he had to tell his servant to take an oath. And you have to swear. You swear on a Bible, right? You swear on a Torah. Or you swear on holding a pair of tefillin. And here, he had nothing holy to use. So the Rebbe says, so let's go back. The world couldn't become something holy. To make a holy object. Therefore, it was necessary for him to tell his servant, place your hand under my thigh and I'll make you swear. The key, right, when he was telling Eliezer that he would swear that he wouldn't take a wife for him from the daughters of Canaan, but he would only go back to his birthplace, to Aram, and find a wife for Isaac. The key, and that he wouldn't take him out of Israel. The key, the law is that when one takes an oath, they have to hold a holy object. In those days, there was nothing holy except the circumcision that Avram Avinu had. So without looking at the inappropriateness of this, there's no, in other words, without looking at the idea of modesty and of what was happening here, etc., the Rebbe says, there was no other choice. Abraham had no other choice except telling his servant to do this. All he could do is say, look, place your hand under my thigh, etc., so that he would be able to swear. And this is, of course, something that we look at bizarre, and it's clearly bizarre. It's clearly absurd. But this is what had to be done because there was no other choice. There was nothing holy, and the Rebbe uses this as an illustration to the predicament that Avram was in. For that matter, the world was in, because the world could not yet be permeated with holiness. But as the Rebbe will explain, something special happened when the Torah was given. And let's continue. What's the reason for all this? There's a process. And at that time, the world was not yet ready, was not yet refined. It wasn't able to accept and receive such a change that it would be able to be permeated with holiness. And that's what we mean, that the mitzvahs that the forefathers did, they were considered like an odor. Kivon she'ein, albeit a pleasant odor. Kivon she'ein zed dover shenichnas upeil b'pnimis ha'inyan. An odor doesn't satiate you; it just smells good, but it's more of a spiritual thing. It doesn't go in, doesn't enter and affect the innermost of whatever it is. An odor is all-encompassing. It could be all over, right? To taste it, you have to put it in your mouth. But to smell it, it could be for going for blocks, right? When your neighbor makes a barbecue in the next block, you smell it where you are. But it's just the smell. The soul can benefit from it, but not the body. This is the service of the soul. But in a way that it should be that like the oil which pours out, that your name is actually brought into this world in a physical sense. It should affect a change in the world. There had to be the abolishment of the decree. And we've learned this idea at the time of Shavuos. The decree was Shal Yenim Yerdu Lumato. The original decree was that the supernal could not go down to the lower realms, and the lower realms couldn't be elevated to the supernal. But that decree had to be abolished, so that holiness could permeate the world, and something from this world could be elevated to holiness. So Shal Yenim Yerdu Lumato, the supernal should be able to descend to this world. The holiness should be drawn down. And that are in the lower realms should be able to be elevated. That means that a physical object should become a supernal object, a holy object. How does that happen? By transforming something of material into and then it becomes coarse into something physical, a physical object, and that physical object becomes holy, and it becomes something that you can perform a mitzvah with it, in a holy sense. So let's say leather, which comes from a cow, which is then turned into tefillin. And the abolition of that decree was when God said, it says, and God went down onto Mount Sinai, the supernal went down to the lower realm. And God told Moses, and to Moses he said, go up to God. The lower ones are elevated to above. That's what happened by the Torah, the giving of the Torah. So now soon we'll come around to the Purim story, but let's see what happened at the time of the giving of the Torah. Did the whole world suddenly become a holy place? Even though when the Torah was given, at the time of the giving of the Torah, immediately there was a change in the whole creation. Even in the realm of the living creatures, animals, the animal kingdom, and in the vegetable kingdom, and in the mineral kingdom, the inanimate. The Medrash said that when the Torah was given, number one, this Medrash says, that the sound, the voice of God was coming out from all four directions and from above and below. Forget Dolby and forget, what's the other one called? The big speaker system from all around, right? All around sound or whatever they call it. And what's it called? The other speaker system, the famous one that you have, the Bose. Thank you, Bose speaker. Forget all that. Here, by giving the Torah, they heard it coming from everywhere. The Medrash says, I am the Lord your God. You should not have anyone beside me. To the extent that the Medrash also says that all animals stopped doing what they were doing. So it says the bird sha'oifli parach v'sherle go chulu. The bird didn't chirp or tweet, and the ox didn't. What's the fancy word for when the deep sound that comes out of an ox? Not the sound. Anyway, the animals did not make a sound. The animals did not. The whole world was affected. That to the extent that they didn't. They didn't. They were still. They didn't make any noise whatsoever. So, give me a second over here, even though. What's the word?
Low.
Yeah, the ox didn't low, and the bird didn't chirp, etc., etc. So the world changed after giving the Torah. It even says that they were able to hear this. I think the Medrash says also that they heard the sound was heard in the whole world. The whole world was affected at the giving of the Torah. So we're talking about this because we're going to get to what happened at Purim. So Mikol Mokim Hoyaz Ashin Lefisha, but it was only a temporary transformation, a temporary change. The Achakach Hoyaz Siluk Shchina Lamaila, and then after the great revelation, the Shchina went back up supernally. And then our work was cut out for us. Then we first had to start. Then we had to begin to serve God after the Torah was given. And by the way, we had our challenges immediately, like we're going to read in this week's parsha. It doesn't say it here in the Maimer, but they had the great challenge right afterwards, because there was a process. So let's see what the Rebbe says. Like it says, God says afterwards the shofar is going to sound. We know it's over, and then when that sound of the shofar is sounded, they can go up on the mountain. They can ascend the mountain. The Keemu, since the holiness went up from the mountain, not only they could touch the mountain. Remember, it said earlier they were restricted from even touching the mountain, but they could even, when it was over, they could climb the mountain. It wasn't the holy place anymore. Because in order to imbue the world with holiness, that will take what we're going to do for it. And generally speaking, everything in the world and the details of the world, it had to only then become holy through the process, through doing the system of the Torah. Truth be told, the Torah was given so that through the Torah we should affect the physicality of the world, to make the world a holy place. And like we say, the regular Chassidic terminology was made to make the world a dwelling place in the lowest realm for God, to make the world holy. Dira mamish, an actual dwelling place. Like a dwelling, an apartment where a person lives and he dwells there with all of his essence. He lives there. But nevertheless, by the giving the Torah, that was just the beginning. And that's why it says in the Megillah, they ratified what they began to do. When did they begin to do it? At the time of the giving the Torah. That the process began to make from the physicality of the world into holy objects and holy things, holy matters, mitzvah things. That This was a slow process, little by little, slowly but surely. Slowly but surely they began to refine something else, another thing in the world, another thing in the world. It's a process. That whole revelation of the giving of the Torah, that was only a supernal thing. So it was great, but then that was the kickoff, so to speak. But then we had to start to do what we're doing, to the extent that the Gemara says something very interesting. The Gemara says, that God held over the mountain over their head like a barrel. Therefore, from here, the Talmud there says that because that was seemingly the Torah, they were coerced to keep the Torah, they were forced to keep the Torah. So therefore, there's a caveat that maybe they didn't do it on their own free will. The Tosfos and all the commentators discussed this because they said Nasa v'nishma, they're willing. And it's explained that there's the willing to do, and then there's the nitty gritty of the details, and that there was some possible reluctance, which they were forced to. They were subtly encouraged to do it, but there was this piece that maybe they were forced, and therefore they didn't accept it by their own free will. Because God held over, He forced them by holding the mountain over their head. The rest of the piece there, it says that if you keep the Torah is good. If not, you're going to get buried here under this mountain. They themselves didn't change yet. They were forced. They said they were committed to that extent, but they hadn't yet changed to be totally committed. So what happened at the time of Achashverosh? That's when they committed by their own free will. Dalet. Where did they really commit fully to all details by their own free will? In the days of Achashverosh, the Purim story. Like the Gemara there in the Tractate of Shabbos on page 88 says, Hadur Kibluha b'mei Achashverosh. They accepted it in the days of Achashverosh to receive Keemu. Hoda really means subsequently. They received it, they accepted it in the days of Achashverosh to receive Keemu Vekiblu Hayehudim. It says that they received it. See, they also received it. They accepted it again. They kept it and they accepted it. The Jewish people. Keemu Masha Kiblu Kvar. They kept what they already received earlier. And what is this all about? The Medrash explains Achashverosh, the king in the Purim story. Hamelech Mehedu Kush, who ruled from India to Ethiopia, Keshem Shemalach al Hedu Kush, just like he ruled over India and Ethiopia. Kach Malach B'Seifei Elam Ad Seifei. He really ruled from one end of the world to the other. Shoyim Meishel B'Kippah. He was a total dictator and he was a ruler over the whole world. That's what it says in the Talmud. He was the monarch of the world, so to speak. He but it says he darkened the faces of the Israelites like the bottom of a burnt pot. He didn't allow them to do it, everything. He made their life miserable. And they had a tough time. From this we understand that the world then was in a very dark state. And it was in a situation of foolishness. The opposite of the holiness of holiness. And then we got the idea of what light and the advantage that light has not only over darkness, but it comes from the darkness. And we discussed this a few weeks ago. The Yisna Chochmah min HaSichlos, and what wisdom has over and coming out of folly and foolishness. Because of the decree, they committed. They weren't that pushed them to the essence of their souls. Just like it says, even though they weren't all perfect people, they were far from it. But nevertheless, when they were pushed and they were threatened to accept Haman and the wickedness, that was their threat. And none of them would accept that. And here the Rebbe explains how the Alter Rebbe explains it. So because, and specifically through that decree, the heart of Israel was awakened in a way that every single individual Israelite and all of the children of Israel, that includes the whole world, the representative of the whole world, and anyone who wanted to join. They stood, and then therefore withstood the decree of Haman. They stood in a way of self-sacrifice. They didn't even think for one moment that they should maybe jump ship, that they should abandon Judaism. Heaven forbid. Even for a second, it says, that whole year, no one even had a thought of doing that. V'hainu shekol hashinuyim, and the Rebbe explained. By the way, the Rebbe explained this the next year afterwards, but he explains it very briefly here. The Alter Rebbe there says the whole year. A year, the word for year in Hebrew is shana. Shana comes from the term shinui, change. It's called a year because there's all the different seasons and all the different things that come up in a year. V'hainu shekol hashinuyim sheyeshna b'meshech kol hashana, all the changes that you have throughout the year, shana b'lashon shinui. Lo yinogu b'nekudas hayadus v'amunah shalahem, that did not affect, touch the quintessential point of their Judaism and their belief, even in their thought process. They didn't even have a thought not to be part. And certainly not in their speech or their deed. They wouldn't do something wrong. And that's why the Jewish people in the whole Megillah are called Yehudim. Like Mordechai is introduced Ish Yehudi, Vel Hayehudim, the Jewish people are called Yehudim the whole time. Why is somebody called, and the Talmud speaks about this, we're called the Yehudi, anyone who denies idol worship, and affirms and admits to the whole Torah, then you're called a Yehudi. Elsewhere in the Talmud it speaks about that. So that's the idea of Yehudi. Yehudi also means to submit to God and godliness, to thank and to admit and submit. And therefore, we had the ratification of what they started. Because this time, it was by their own free choice. Not because they were being forced with a mountain. Keemu, they ratified that which they received already beforehand at the giving of the Torah. Sheisha v'teikif, that it should remain strong and steadfast. Kashem shemei Purim eila v'teichnam liyavru v'teicha Yehudim v'zichnu yosem zaram. And like it says, and the Rebbe connects that here, the verse in Esther, and the Talmud explains this, that these days of Purim and what they represent will never go away from the Jewish people, and the celebration of Purim, to remember it and to do it, will never cease from their offspring. Other things could be nullified. When Mashiach comes, things are going to be nullified because there'll be something so greater. But Purim is going to still stay the same old-fashioned way in a great physical celebration with all of its mitzvahs, from gold in a revealed way, ube'erov, a simcha, and in light and in happiness. So this whole mimer is more or less something that you have to use the yellow highlighters. This is talking about how we have to do things for the right thing. So it should be for us speedily, immediately. Just like it was, like it says in the Megillah, the Jews had light and happiness and glad and joy and glory. Actually, so, like, and it's the simplest way of understanding, and with all of the explanations that it says that the light is a reference to Torah, and Simcha was Yontif, and Sosan was the circumcision, Mila, Yikor was Tefillin. B'mei Purim, that we in these days of Purim, Hine Gam Mismach Gula. There's a nuance that we make when there's a discussion in the Talmud if there's two Adars, when do you make the Purim? The first or the second? So you make the second, and the second Adar you make Purim. So that we should have the redemption of Purim and Pesach in proximity to each other. So then also the redemption should be in proximity. So then we have the redemption of Purim should be in the proximity of the redemption of Mashiach. So we should have, so in the proximity of these redemptions should be the light of Torah, which Torah, we should have the fulfillment, like it says in the Medrash, that we're going to learn Torah from the mouth of our righteous Mashiach, from the mouth of the Holy One, blessed be, from God alone. Like it says in Isaiah, that new Torah will come out from me. Adli korei tefillin, and then it says oida v'simchos sasem vikor. Vikor is a reference to tefillin. So shehuk shekol Torah kula tefillin. The tefillin is also a reference for all mitzvahs. So we'll have all the mitzvahs in a great way when Mashiach comes. Hainu kol mitzvahs shebetorah. All the mitzvahs in Torah shios v'tachlis hashleimus. That'll be the ultimate and their ultimate fulfillment. Like we say in the Musaf prayers, that then we will do before you like the commandments of your will. So we'll do the mitzvahs, the ultimate kivan shosti ashleimus v'minim edaber. We will have then fulfillment in humankind, in who speak. That's why we're called the medaber. Heichel beiketz b'nei Yisrael, primarily beginning and primarily the children of Israel. Aleim nemer odom atem. About them, the prophet Ezekiel says, you are Odom, humanity. Atem kruyim Odom Hashem Adam Le'elyon, and you're called Odom because you are similar to the supernal. The word Odom is like Adam, which is the name of humankind, like you are similar to the supernal one, to God. And then through the human being will bring this fulfillment, this ultimate into the animal kingdom. That we could bring from it the offerings, and we make things for mitzvahs from the animal kind. Similarly also in the vegetable kingdom and the inanimate kingdom, the mineral. Nowadays actually so we'll have then the fulfillment of the verse in Isaiah 40, that the glory of God will be revealed, and all flesh will be able to see, like we've said previously, that we'll be able to perceive this perception, we'll see, all the flesh will see it, it'll be so great. Bagola, Didan, and hour, speedily for us, we'll have this redemption. Everyone should have a very happy Purim, and a fulfilling Purim, and an inspirational Purim, and indeed we should have the fulfillment of what we just read, but we'll still have it together with the party of Purim, l'chaim, l'chaim.